Hey, John.
Hey, Nick. Boy, it's good to be inside. No rain in here. Boy, I
You know,
love seeing
it's
that rain thing on. That's great,
I
man.
knew I knew the rain was coming, and sort of all the way through the weekend, it was sort of saying light rain. I might get away with it. I might get a. This morning, the heavens just opened, so we might see. Come tomorrow, we might see a little bit of water in my lake behind me.
Praise God. You know, your Bastille Day present from the heavens. Not,
we
not that.
we had quite a quiet Bastille Day this side of the English Channel.
Yeah, on this side of the Atlantic as well. You know, we definitely leave that to the frogs. Is that a frog over there? No, that's not a frog. All right. That anyway. That what are we up to now? What's I mean what
So this is episode 15, which means we're in the middle of our project of celebrating J.K. Rowling's Kanreki, and we're back to a book, a proper book. And that's look at that. Do you know, I am relieved. I'm relieved to get back to a proper
Yeah,
a
what's our
proper book.
next text is a screenplay, so
I
don't
know,
get too comfortable with here, you know.
but I think it's very apt that we've got, in terms of the 7 books that are now published, we've got to the center of the 7 books. We're in the middle of our Kanreki celebrations, and I have to say how much fun this is. I mean, people may not realize this is entirely unscripted. We do not rehearse, and it's part of the fun that we have. However, for this show, it does show that maybe I should rehearse a little bit more pressing the record button. So this is actually our second time through. I'd be interested to see some feedback, whether you think we're funnier, more insightful, less funny, less info. Let's see. Maybe we should rehearse.
Well, yeah, I was delighted, Nick, because when we realized that we weren't recording, I had just started my shed point. So
Yeah.
you had done all the heavy lifting, and I had just begun to talk. So
Uh,
I was like, wow, that's a harsh thing. I guess I'll have to say this tomorrow. You know, or whatever. That's great. Anyway, yeah, this has been a lot of fun for us. We're beginning after 2 weeks of this. People are beginning to comment, and
yeah.
it's a lot more fun. That's a lot
Thank
more
you,
fun.
everyone that's engaging. We really enjoy reading what you're saying. So,
All right,
Lake and Shed.
Lincoln's
What are we doing here?
why
So I'm
why
out
why
here. I'm out here in South Wales in the pouring rain in front of my lake, and John is over there in Oklahoma City enjoying subtropical, not to say oven-like temperatures inside his
no,
shed.
we are getting rain here,
Ah,
and then the heat comes, and
okay.
so Oklahoma really could be considered to be about 700 miles of sauna right now, which is unique. You know, it's sort of like Houston is full time. We get it for a few days here in Oklahoma City.
But we've decided to place ourselves in the middle of J.K. Rowling's metaphor for her creative process. So when she's asked where do your ideas come from, she uses this metaphor of the lake and the shed. The lake is where she lifts her inspiration, sometimes unformed, sometimes semi-formed, and that comes from her subconscious. It comes from her unresolved issues, and then she takes that idea and she works on it in her shed, and that is where she applies her artistry and where she turns that idea into the inspirational literature that we all know and love.
Yeah, really, the inspiration comes from the lake. I mean, the answer to the question when she gave the gift to the Museum of Curiosities was, what's your source of inspiration? And she explained her whole writing process. The first part of which is the inspiration, which is these in large part, the unresolved issues of her life crises. And that's the lake. That's where you are. That's the three buoys of the lake, the pillars of the lake, the seven. Oh, it's four. It's four of them.
Yes, every now and again I add an extra one.
The ages of Joe.
Yeah.
That's the Nick pillar, really. The crises of her life. Yeah. 7 plus one of those. Always another one of those. The core beliefs. And what am I forgetting this time?
So this is her friendship circle. So the people she knows, the people she works with, and the characters that she knows. Yeah,
that's right. All right, so great. Yeah, so you got the four buoys. When you go into the shed, we've moved from inspiration to her writing process and her method, and that's where you have the three shed items are her tools, or what I used to call the hidden keys. And those are the traditional and, well, they're largely traditional, things that she adds into the stories to give them some real heft and to challenge the reader. Then there are the 12 golden threads. 12 is a figurative number. I think we've gone as high as 15. And I think by the end of this show, we might be up to 20. The things that you find in every single one of her works. In the rehearsal, you shocked me with one of these. I hope I can share the same shock when you drop this bomb on this one from Lethal White. And then the last one are her core, the themes that she's mentioned in interviews, that this is what this book is about. And there's probably 5 of those, and those align fairly neatly with the 5 core beliefs over in the lake. That's, some people are always saying to us, hey, let's get to the golden threads, enough with the stupid books, let's get to this. And I get that. Presbyterian, Louis, I see you out there. We're going to do that. There's only 21 books, and we got 31 days. So, we're on that. But that probably is our next project after this, is some sort of online course or program that people can take to get the 7 parts of her lake and her shed, and all the individual pieces of that, so that when you go into a Rowling work, you can enjoy the story the first time, but when you reread it, and our audience is essentially rereaders, they go through it and say, "Oh, that's a black, white, red moment." This is there's that golden thread. There's that, someone's pregnant. Are they trying to trap somebody? This. You can follow the golden threads, and it. And maybe if we ever see, I don't know, I'm still in shock from what you said the other day. So I'm going to let you, I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag this early. Anyway, today's book, what is the context, Nick, of Lethal White? What year are we in? And this is really at a remarkably intense period of her life.
Yeah. So we're in early autumn 2018. So September 2018 is the release date of Lethal White. And if you were with us yesterday and the day before, there's an awful lot going on. We've had to wait 2 years from the previous book, so an unusually long wait. But if you read the acknowledgements, I think Rowling says it best, just how much pressure she's in. So this is in the acknowledgements to Lethal White, and she writes, my husband Neil read the manuscript while I was writing it. His feedback was invaluable, and he also supported me in 1,000 practical ways. But I think I'm most grateful for the fact that he never once asked why I decided to write a large, complex novel while also working on a play and 2 screenplays. I know he knows why, but there aren't many people who would have resisted the temptation. So mentioned two screenplays. Our next show tomorrow is going to be about Crimes of Grindelwald. So that gets its premiere in Paris in just a couple of months' time from where we are in September 2018.
Yeah, seriously, I think if the Lord tarries and we see another 50 years, I have my doubts. But if we see another 50 years and Rowling and present company, we've all exited this earthly plane. Historians will look back at that period of Rowling's life and say, how many writers in their lives have done anything like this? Especially with Lethal White is a weird book. It's very complex and like Goblet of Fire. I think it was Beatrice Groves who first said that Goblet of Fire was just a silly book. Harry Potter could have gone into Moody's, faux Moody's office and touched the teacup and been transported right to the little hand. We could have done that portkey from the start. But so same with Lethal White. We have that Stubbs painting, and once that Chuckleluck Raphael sees that it's a Stubbs painting, he could have worked something out. He's not a stupid boy, as they say. He definitely could have figured it out, but he is a stupid boy. He tries to drive, a hardcore UK minister to governmental minister to suicide. That to me was just so. It's just like, well, we knew that was never happening. That to me is just a man that proud and arrogant doesn't commit suicide. Anyway, so very, very bizarre time in Rowling's life. Very busy time, very productive time. Really inspired work. We get the middle book of the series, which if you put these, the books on the shelf, the 3 before and the 3 after, this is the only one with a white binder. We have 3 black and 3 black after it. Rowling seems to be marking that the 7 books are set. I'm hopeful that books 8, 9, and 10 will be a different color somehow. Maybe they'll be red. Have a red spine so that they'll stand out as a different cycle. We'll see. Anyway, I guess it's time for us to talk about the shed. The shed. No, the lake.
The lake. So my pillar for today is going to be core beliefs. So I'm going to talk about class and politics, mainly about class, the British class system. So even after all these years of enlightenment and social progression, we still have fairly well described class system here in the UK. So you have an underclass, so that is outside of the class system. These are non-productive members of society, the criminal class, below working class. Then you have working class. So these are manual workers. It's considered now in these modern times quite an aspirational class to be in. So there is credibility in being working class. Then you have lower middle class. So these are typically clerks. So a white collar but fairly low paid white collar job. Then you have middle class, and they are managers and qualified people. You have upper middle class, and these are doctors and solicitors and academics, professional people. And then you have
academics aren't making money, so this is not a money gradient.
It's absolutely not a money gradient. So there are lots of examples of working class multimillionaires. Now, I just said they were manual workers, but it is much more of not what you are doing now, but what your background is, the way you speak, your social conventions, how you take your tea.
Will you put cream in your tea? When you put cream in your tea?
Only an American, John, would put cream in their tea. That puts you outside of the class system immediately. So it's one of the tells, particularly. So a socially mobile class, like lower working class, usually has a working class background. So they're very conscious of social conventions. So unlike working class conventions, there is definite rules to how you make a cup of tea. And my background is lower middle class, so I know this very well. And you when you're pouring a cup of tea, you put the milk in the cup first, and then you pour the tea. And you know, there's myths around why that's important. So you don't scorch the milk by putting all the milk into hot tea, which is just ludicrous. But anyway, that's the way it's done. When you get to middle class, upper middle class, then that is a faux pas because you are showing yourself to be lower middle class by doing that. The correct way to pour tea is to pour tea into the cup first, and then you add your milk. The strength of the tea is another class tell.
Okay.
So working class, lower middle class, we like a strong cup of tea. As you go up the class ladder, then your tea gets more and more anemic as you rise in social status. Um, Upper class is a little bit different. So upper class actually has a qualification. So you can't just rise from upper middle class to upper class just by money or just your social circle or just because you choose to go fox hunting. So the requirement is land and a few generations. So you have to be what's called a landed family. Now, bizarrely, to be a landed family, you don't currently have to have land. So you could have sold the estate
Ah,
off. You could have sold the estate off, but because your family was landed, you retain those upper class credentials. So yeah, you need land, country house, and a couple of generations, and then your descendants can get rid of the house and grounds if they want to. You've become upper class.
so um, is there a difference between Rowling's parents, Rowling, and her children in terms of
Yes.
class status?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, there's a whole heap of guesswork in there, but that's never stopped me before. So,
Be
so I,
shameless.
so I think it's fairly clear that Rowling's mother and father were brought up in working class households. So London, solid working class. Um,
And that's you said that you called that aspirational, which means that they hoped to move out of being working class.
Well, from what I can tell, not so. No. So take Peter Rowling's father. Ernest was a warehouseman. He worked in a tobacco warehouse as a stockman, and then he went into retail. He had a grocer's shop, also sold sweets and tobacco products, but solidly working class. Um, his sons, Peter and Geoffrey, both went to become engineers. We know more about Peter because more was written about him. We know he joined the Royal Navy as an artificer, which is a highly technical grade. He must have had good results in school to get that position. Um, when Anne became pregnant, he Anne had to leave. I think it's almost certain that Peter was pressured to leave. Certainly, if he was going to marry Anne, he would have had to have left anyway, and they did marry. And then his brother, who seems to have done quite well at the Rolls-Royce Aero engine factory in Bristol, managed to get him an apprenticeship. And again, this is all solidly working class stuff. Now, in later years, he's described as a manager. I don't quite know how accurate that is as a description, and I'm trying to judge earning potential based off of the property that he had. He was probably a qualified engineer at least, but you can see by the way the property moves from. I mean, at that time you couldn't describe it as slum housing, but very, very cheap housing on the outskirts of Bristol to uh, better housing on the outskirts of Bristol to this character cottage. Now, it is a character cottage, and uh, that seems like an aspirational move for somebody who's looking to become lower middle class, middle class. It's a very small cottage, and it needed a lot of work done to it. Not all of that work was completed by the time the family finally moved out.
They did fill in the trap door in the living room.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's yeah. Well, interestingly, that trap door seems to have been a small coal cellar. So it was Church Cottage was built originally as a school attached to the church, and the cold cellar would have been used to store milk for the children. So in UK schools, right up until the early 80s, milk was distributed to children as a health measure in all of our schools. Yes, John, it's a socialist paradise. Margaret Thatcher got rid of the milk, by the way.
One more reason to adore Aunt Marge. That's
Yeah, but you could describe that as aspirational, particularly if Peter was to compare how he was doing to his brother Geoffrey. So his brother, I think it's fair to say, was in management and earning a very good salary. He had a very good house in a very desirable seaside location in Clevedon. Both of his children were going to public schools. His son was going to an excellent public school. It's described as the Catholic Eton.
Again, you describe them as public schools. For our American friends,
Yeah.
that is not a public school. that is an elite preparatory academy.
Yeah.
Not and if I remember the article you wrote on Hogwarts Professor, please remind me to put that into the links down below about this cousin. This was a matter of some contention among the cousins, where he says she just lived off hearing about his stories about that preparatory school, and that her father, he felt, could have afforded to send his children to those schools, but simply elected not to, that the comprehensive was good enough for them. From what I'm getting from you is that you're suggesting that no, he couldn't have afforded that.
I don't think so. Unless if he could have afforded it, then money was leaking out of that household in a way I can't detect. And of course, that's always possible.
I want to thank you again for taking me to that house. My very brief visit to Wales at my graduation, we got to go to Tuthill and see the church cottage and walk around and see the graveyard, see the church, see the back. The backyard was maybe the biggest tell of the place. That was revelation to me.
Yeah. So, well, let me first, for my Lake Point, let me take you to another property. So this is in Uffington that we briefly drove through on the way to on the way to the White Horse. So this is Chisel House, owned by the Chisel family, a landed family. So you could consider they've had enough generations with that land, with that house, that they are an upper class family. They have the ridiculous upper class nicknames, Izzy Chisel, and all of that. Now, within that house, they have a small cottage, and within that small cottage lives Jackie Kent and his two sons. Now, Jackie Kent, miserable character as he appears to be, you could describe him as working class, skilled working class. He was a carpenter, cabinet maker. Yes, he did odd jobs, but he was working class in this property, entirely surrounded by Chisel House. Two children. One of them becomes a socialist agitator and serial litigator and fraudster. The other one leaves home psychologically damaged, unable to work, really struggling. You could describe certainly him as a underclass. Now, this reminds me
And
very much.
the brother takes care of
Yes.
the handicapped other brother. Okay.
So this reminds me very much of another little cottage. This one in Little Hangleton, and this is the Gaunt cottage. So the Gaunt cottage is surrounded by property owned by the Riddles. So you remember the riding party where they're saying, no, we own everything over this side of the valley. Apart from this cottage, a tramp lives there. Now, a little bit curious to use the word tramp. Certainly, it appears that the Riddles considered the Gaunts to be underclass. Although to be a tramp, strictly speaking, the only requirement is you don't have any property. But we'll pass over that. I think certainly in purebred or not, in Muggle terms, you could describe them as underclass. There's two children. One of them gets sent to Azkaban. The other one leaves home, pregnant, destitute, unable to earn a living, and a single mother. Which
dies in childbirth.
Dies in childbirth. Which reminds me of another little cottage that we've just talked about in Tuts Hill. So you can't see it from the road. So actually, when I was there with John, I didn't know. We had a suspicion because John talked about the backyard, and you can see a massive, must be 18-foot wall, and a long wall. And we've got country houses around here. And we've got the remains of country houses, and I know what a walled garden looks like, and I'm thinking that's a walled garden of a very grand house, and it is. So actually surrounding the Tuts Hill St Luke's Church seems to have been carved out of the estate of a house called East Cliff. So East Cliff was J.K. Rowling's closest neighbor. So the next house to them was this manor house. We don't know if the family from East Cliff attended St. Luke's. We do know that members of the family are buried in the churchyard there, because I went back to check. Within that,
you made that long trip, Nick. You made that long trip.
Yeah, I planned it for days. So 40 minutes. John jokes. So two children in that household. They live home. One of them ends up homeless, destitute, single mother. Sibling looks after them in their initial extremis. So I think that there's some fun reflections there. Now, in terms of class,
seriously, we had the rehearsal yesterday, and I'm glad in a way this was obliterated because I fell out of my chair at this point. This is a connection that will be a hallmark of Rowling studies hereafter. So, just real quickly, what Nick has done here is shown that Church Cottage in Tuts Hill is the model with an unhappy family with two children. Is the model for the core, the fundamental crime and crisis in the Harry Potter novels is Merope Gaunt's abuse, physical, emotional, psychological, by her father and her brother. And that agony that she experiences results in her having a pregnancy trap marriage with magic, and her incapacity to deal with her life. She didn't have an education that was of any quality and didn't have any contacts, and she despairs. And we get the Dark Lord in that. So that's the foundation crime and what out of which the entire Harry Voldemort crisis is born. is the Tuts Hill Cottage embedded inside of the story that we don't really meet until what is it, the sixth book? We don't really get into Half-Blood Prince. I think we were supposed to get that, I think, in Chamber of Secrets, but she decided, oh no, narrative release means this has got to be put off even farther. But it's really at the beginning of the story. When we talked about Suzette and Fabula, this is the first event in the Fabula. That when the reader at the end has his sequence of the event, say the Harry Potter lexicon timeline, bang, it's Merope gone. You know, that's you've put your finger on the connection between that unresolved crisis in Rowling's life, her living in the working class at best cottage with an artisan, and then in the only one you haven't mentioned, which is very much like this, is the family, the Prices in Casual Vacancy, which doesn't have the core crime. Really, Crystal Whedon is the star of the story with Barry Fairbrother's ghost and this and that. But the advent of Barry Fairbrother's ghost comes from the Price family. You know, that's the first computer that we get. That's the unhappy older son of Price who's been abused and this and that, has been moved. I mean, that is another instance. That's really the centerpiece in terms of Rowling's, lake inspiration for that story is in the Price family cottage. Now, you haven't done your geography of Casual Vacancy talk yet, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a connection between Tuts Hill and that Price family cottage.
Yeah. So it's situationally, other than Rowling puts the Price family cottage on a hill, and actually Tuts Hill is all relatively flat land. That's the Price cottage. So it's
okay. So again, we got it in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
it's the foundation crime of Harry Potter. It's a centerpiece, if not the centerpiece, of her most autobiographical piece. I mean, clearly, Price Cottage, Price family is the most obvious Rowling point of correspondence in that book. So we have it there as well. And now you've brought up Jacket Cannon. This is the part that blew my mind, because if you read the story as a 7-part ring, this is dead center in it. And the foundation, the Billy coming into the office out of his mind, talking about these things. And then the center of the novel, I think, is when they find the horse remains in the graveyard. I'm curious as if that family on the hill behind Tuts Hill Cottage, if they had horses, because there's something haunting J.K. Rowling about horses, big white horses. And I wondered if she had bad dreams about them being buried in that graveyard next to her house, because this is the event which is eating at Billy, who, in correspondence, obviously Billy is out of his mind, but he's also an artisan. He takes the white horse of Uffington, this archetypal feature on a nearby hill, and he carves it into the side of the scaffolding, the scaffold that is the crime that sort of drives the mysterious crime underneath everything in this book. He becomes the artist of the family with this archetypal signature. That's the connection, I think, between Billy and Joanne, and that. It's the foundation thing, because remember that the chiseled oldest son, whose name I'm forgetting, he shoots that horse just out of cruelty from a height. I wonder if there wasn't some kind of event between that family and Church Cottage that Rowling has poetically turned into this story, because it's that horse which is buried on the Jack of Kent property that becomes Billy's fevered imagination, his remembrance that there's a child buried underneath. And of course, that buried child, that dead child, is a golden thread that Rowling does. We'll talk about later this month. That wow, Nick, I mean, seriously. Now I can't wait to read the Ichabod. I'm like, where's the house? Where This is going to be, I'm going to be looking for church goddess in everything we read here on out. There's two children in the Christmas pig. There's, this is really going to be a touchstone now. A golden thread on the lakeside. We don't have any golden. I mean, all the golden threads in a way are unresolved psychological issues. But boy, you have really brought that crisis of her relationship with her father right to the fore. And we should probably just close this adventure because there's nothing I'm going to say in the shed. I've got a play by Ibsen that's going to touch that. So I'm gonna count on you to say something important about Rosmersholm to segue into this, so I don't look like a complete jackass. Trying to, here's John following the revelation of Rowling studies to the thing. Whew, boy, this is the dean of Harry Potter scholars playing I don't know, court jester to the master here. But go on. Say something nice about Rosmersholm, so I don't feel like a complete idiot.
I mean, a joint effort from a conversation we had yesterday, really, about Rosmersholm. It was noted by quite a lot of the fandom, the coincidence of Thom Burke opening in a West End stage play of Rosmersholm, which is not really one of Ibsen's signature works. It's not the one that you see all the time.
It's not repertoire for great actors to know Rosmer's.
So we just said, wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be funny if that stage play was actually produced by Sonia Friedman, the producer of Cursed Child, business partner to J.K. Rowling. They jointly own the company that controls the worldwide putting on of all the Cursed Child plays. Wouldn't it be funny if that was her production? And there was a comment on the Hogbro website, and we followed it up with searching the Sonia Friedman website.
No,
and absolutely,
we didn't follow this up, Nick. that would be you. Okay, let's Nick and his tapeworm went to work and did this. Use that first person plural. But thank you very much.
I mean, I love to think. Almost certainly there's nothing sinister in this, but I love to imagine that Rowling was working deeply, as she has to, because I mean, John's going to talk about just how indebted this book is to Rosmersholm. Beatrice Groves, who John and I are probably her greatest fans.
Well, I have a small shrine to her over here in the shed.
Yeah. Has and Queen of the Epigraph has described this book when it came out as the most epigraphically indebted novel ever. Not most indebted of Rowling's works, the most epigraphically indebted. Now, obviously, this was before we had Troubled Blood and The Fairy Queen came out, but every single epigraph to every single chapter coming from this one work. So Rowling must have read this play backwards, forwards, and sideways, looking for the right epigraphs to put into Lethal White. And I just love the thought that Sonia and Rowling were sat down for a business lunch at some time, and Rowling was just waxing lyrical about this wonderful Ibsen's play that she's reading about, and that just put the thought in Friedman's mind. Well, okay, this is the lady that is earning the vast majority of my profits for the last 5 years and will be for the next 20 years. She likes the play. Let's put on the play.
I have a different vision of this, Nick. I have her having lunch with Thom Burke, and her explaining to him, if you're really going to get Lethal White and really get into this character, because he's that kind of actor, I think, you're going to have close to a memorized knowledge of Ibsen's Rosmersholm. And he was like, how can I, sorry, I have to pay bills. How am I going to do that? And she, because she's got to be a little bit embarrassed about the whole Cursed Child thing, because Cursed Child, well, it won all these awards and is raking in money in ways. Can't you use a rake? It's more like a backhoe. You're bringing in money, and now it's a global phenomenon, and we can be very confident that Cursed Child will be forgotten in a generation, will not make any impression at all in the history of theater or anything like that. There's been nothing, no one's trying to impersonate it with the double shows or anything like that and the magic thing. I mean, this is a nothing burger. Other than Black Hermione and the gay Albus and Scorpius, which made, a lot of tabloid headlines and fandom nastiness, but that doesn't travel very well through time in terms of influence. And yet, it's bringing people to the theater that have never been to the theater, never been to that part of London or to Broadway or such. And it's going to be, and now they've got a high school version, so this is going to be performed by high school students. This is an important play in terms of reviving theater and drama, which seemed to have been the point of that exercise. But I think Rowling may have been a little embarrassed, because here's this Jack Thorne play with almost no literary merits, and then the silence, and then and more silence, that Ethel Merman moment. That anyway, I think she may have thought, hey, how about Thom? How about I talked to Sonia, my buddy Sonia, and we decide to put on. We've been talking about what kind of theater we want to put on that really, bring back real theater. How about you play Rosmer? Then you will have a memorized knowledge of this play, and we do that. So there's my fan fiction to this conversation, Nick. And thank you for the beautiful segue here. I'm going to begin my conversation here about Lethal White. The B. Groves quotation is important here. I think I said in our previous talk at the end that I listened to Rosmersholm 15 times. Well, I went back and I read the piece that I wrote about Rosmersholm at Hogwarts Professor, which oddly enough is one of the most frequently referenced things. I don't know if it's Ibsen people that Google Rosmersholm and Hogwarts Professor pops right up. They're like, what is this? But this is a sign of how little has been written about Rosmersholm, that we must be one of the top Google hits on the subject. But I reread the piece, and it wasn't 15 times. I'd only listened to it 5 times in a row before I wrote that piece. And in it, I wanted to encourage people to actually read the text. Even among serious strikers, and we're in that. I don't think people read the text in question. It's very rare for people to read the text in question. I mean, seriously, the two biggest commenters on Troubled Blood and its relationship to Fairy Queen, Elizabeth Barrett Hardy and Beatrice Groves, both were already expert in everything Spencer. Those of us who knew who Spencer was, and maybe had read the first book, which is usually what's read in survey courses of Fairy Queen, we were, holding on. I don't think many of us. I know I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't go back and say I've got to conquer Fairy Queen for that book. And I wanted to encourage people to read Rosmersholm because one, we didn't know about the avalanche that was going to be Troubled Blood, probably the best thing that Rowling's ever written. But should we do 2 shows on Troubled Blood, Nick? Because I've got Shed stuff coming out.
I think that at least deserves 2 shows.
Oh, okay. So that's going to totally explode our plan for the month. But anyway, we'll do a supplement. How about for paid subscribers? You get a second Troubled Blood. Anyway, this the piece I wrote was 5 good reasons that serious readers of Rowling should read Ibsen's Rosmersholm, read it closely, listen to it in performance, take notes. Right, by making it the source of every chapter epigraph in Galbraith's Lethal White, which remains, until we get to that 8th book, it really is the centerpiece of the Cormoran Strike mysteries. She's signaling that this play is something of a key or cipher for the right understanding of her current series, especially in light of what Nick just told us about it touching on the core formative unresolved crisis of her life, which is her relationship with her family. The Freudian family romance, in the words of Camille Paglia, and certainly also the Germaine Greer school of feminism that Rowling is really a product of. Okay, let's talk about this. I mean, if you want the shortcut though to Rosmersholm, just go to Gutenberg.com, or you can buy a copy of it. But the shortcut is you watch it on YouTube. But you can just go to Wikipedia. The Wikipedia article is quite good. It does give you all the details of the play. Total spoil you for the wow. Surprised me. I mean, wasn't it Curse Shaw where they had a little button saying, don't spoil the secret or something?
Keep the secrets.
Keep the secrets for a doofus play like that. Anyway, the secret at the end of Rosmersholm is such a wow and so profoundly disturbing. And let's use the word, Nick. It's about incest. Okay. It's about a woman being abused by her father, and she doesn't even recognize it as abuse. She understands it as love. Okay. That's and how that bleeds into the rest of her life, her relationship with Rosmer, the death of Beata Rosmer. Wow. It's a wow finish. And you'll get that from the Wikipedia article, as well as my just having spoiled it for you right there. Anyway, I encourage you to do any of those things. Read the Wikipedia thing. But if you really want to get Lethal White, which if you've read my stuff on Running Grave, you know that Lethal White does line up with Cuckoo's Calling and Running Grave as the thing that forms the axis of that 7-part ring. And it's not is it close? Is it maybe? It is solidly the centerpiece of that, with the fake suicide and all these things. Here are the 5 reasons. The first thing is this is unique among Strike novels in that every that we had up to that point. The first 3 Strike novels have epigraphs. Really, Rowling went to epigraphs with Deathly Hallows, with the Aeschylus and the pen things that she said were a guiding light to her to make sure she was in the right spot. If those epigraphs worked when she got to Deathly Hallows, she was still on course. Then she moves in the Strike novels, every book, every chapter. Of course, the Donnie chapters in Career of Evil don't get them, which is to say that's when you knew that you could skip that chapter if you didn't want to have your mind messed with. Cuckoo's Calling used a variety of classical authors and poets, Virgil de Boethius. The Silkworm had multiple Jacobean revenge dramas as source material. The pithy quotations for Career of Evil were all from the same American rock band, Blue Oyster Cult, but from many different songs and from different lyricists. Now, those borrowings made a certain sense. We learn in Cuckoo, for example, that Strike is something of an Aeneas in being a wounded soldier in search of his destiny. Silkworm is a postmodern revenge drama, which take its plot points from the older genre's tropes and cliches. Career of Evil uses rock lyrics after the fashion of Ian Rankin's John Rebus novels, and Strike 3 is, in essence, the best Rebus novel not written by Rankin, or the most feminist novel in Ian Rankin's oeuvre. And we learn in the novel, too, that Lita Strike was a great fan of Blue Oyster Cult, had a lyric of theirs tattooed above her pudenda, and gave her son the name Blue, Bluey, in their honor. Rosmersholm, in contrast, doesn't appear on the surface of the story. Only obliquely in Lethal White was Strike's uncharacteristically muddled and incomplete recall. Strike has a failing in memory. That's a big red flag. Pay attention, right? White horses, Strike said. Isn't there a play where white horses appear as a death omen? Now, Robin doesn't follow up with that. Was like, your memory's not working here, Cormoran. Yeah, this is. Uh, we're definitely meant to say, what is that about? And of course, that is Rosmersholm. White horses appear more often and dramatically in Lethal White than they do in Rosmersholm, and that play is the only source for all the book's epigraphs. For the serious reader, those are all red flags. Slow down, take a close look at Rosmersholm for ideas of what Lethal White is about. Now, there's a host of correspondences, and if you want to read these in any kind of depth, go to that article that I wrote. The link is down below, to that Rosmersholm article. But let's go through 7 of them really quickly. Jasper Chiswell is blackmailed in Lethal White by Jimmy Knight, this firebrand leftist, straight out of Jack against, family there, and by Geraint Wynne, establishment figure. One wants money, the other wants revenge for the death by suicide of his teenage daughter years ago, a death caused in large part by Chiswell's late son. Now, that's an exact mirror of the plot of Rosmersholm. Aristocrat and former clergyman John Rosmer, a widower whose wife committed suicide, is manipulated both by a revolutionary newspaper editor, Mortensgaard, and by the establishment professor Kroll, Rosmer's brother-in-law, into taking positions he would not take otherwise in order to protect his reputation and that of Rebecca West. Kroll and Mortensgaard had each received messages from the late Mrs. Rosmer that implied her husband was unfaithful to her. So really, Kroll is angry and wants revenge, like Geraint Wynne. Okay, so that's the heart of Rosmersholm, and that's the driving mystery play force. That's why Chisel hires Ellicott and Strike Detective Agency, and it's there it is. That's the central thing. The underlying mystery of Rosmersholm is why Beata Rosmer, John Rosmer's wife, had committed suicide. It turns out she'd been convinced by the insinuation and hints of Rebecca West that Rosmer would be happier if she were not in the way of his being able to marry West. The death of Jasper Chiswell and Lethal White was meant to be a suicide that Raphael and Kinvara pushed him into, but the old man figured out their plot, so they were compelled to kill him and stage it as a suicide. Now, again, there's the suicide angle. It's straight out of Rosmersholm. The polarity of Rosmersholm is the conflict between the new atheistic spirit of liberalism, represented by Mortensgaard and West, and the conventional caste Lutheranism of the schools and church for which Professor Kroll speaks. Lethal White, in parallel, is a novel split between the blue blood chisels, their neglected manor, and the House of Parliament, and the hand-to-mouth existence of Jimmy Knight and his band of pathetic, sordid revolutionaries, self-anointed revolutionaries. So, again, class distinctions. Nick's covered that already. Lethal White features real law breaking on the part of Robin and Cormoran. The listening devices, her smartphone left on to record conversations without permissions. Overheard conversations play an outsized part in Rosmersholm too, as Rebecca West listens in on the seemingly private exchanges of Rosmer with both Kroll and Mortensgaard in Act 2, in which each reveals to him the letters they received from his late wife. Those of you, if, in terms of English literature in the 20th century, Rosmersholm is important on its own merits, but it's also because Rebecca West, the famous novelist and travel writer, if you want to call it that, took the name Rebecca West. It's not her real name, because of she performed the play, and the revelation of the play and how Rebecca West had been a prisoner to her Freudian family romance and escaped it is largely the message that novelist took from it. Anyway, so, aside, that's a footnote, Dick. Do you like that? You look to the bottom of the page. John's going to give a little shout out to Rebecca West. Anyway, number 5, Professor Cole admits to a private agony soon after returning in Act 1 to the Rosmersholm Manor for the first time since his sister's suicide. His son has betrayed the family faith he believed and joined Mortensgaard's leftists. We learn in the consequent acts of the play that Kroll is a martinet at home, and that his son's rebellion is understandable in light of the father's unfeeling cruelty to his wife and children. Nick, does that sound like
Sounds like a bad dad.
Sounds like a bad dad, doesn't it, Nick? Could that explain why Rowling has chosen this novel as the epigraphic, gold mine for this thing? I think so. Anyway, Raphael Chiswell is strangled as a really young child until he passes out by his much older half brother and sadist in the Eye of the White Horse of Uffington. His father, though, blames the younger boy. Can we say Jasper Chiswell is a bad? Yes, and neglects and reviles him when he grows up. Remember that the crime, the defining murder of Goblet of Fire is the patricide of Faux Moody, who kills the minister, right? The parallels between Goblet and Lethal White are extraordinary. But anyway, I think Evan Willis actually guessed who the murderer was.
Yeah, he predicted.
Wait a minute, unhappy son of a minister? He's not who. Watch out, Robin. He's a bad guy. Anyway, Raphael revenges himself by cuckolding the old man and then murdering him. This is totally unfeeling about it. It was harder than I thought. He says to Robin, right? It's just total psychopath. But that image of hatred of the bad dad and how it drives the force of these things, and the patricide at the center of both the Harry Potter series and of the first 7 Cormoran Strike novels, points to the bad dad issues of Jack of Kent and that family in the Chisel estate, as well as those in Tutson. Boy, a lot of lake and shed bleeding here going on.
There is.
Yeah. There it is. As Rowling is choosing here in her shed a play with literary allusions that seem to shadow the unresolved crises of her own life from her home. The mystery of Rosmersholm is being resolved in real time here at Hogwarts Professor. All right. The left and right sides, you go on to more correspondences. The left and right sides of play and novel, they both live in dread of one power, which is newspapers. In Rosmersholm, Morton's Guard has a journal, The Lantern, and Kroll's faction buys a small publication to transform into a weapon for their side as a counterforce to the other newspaper. Each side shamelessly, distorts and reshapes the news to fit their respective talking points and coerce those in the fence to pick sides. Rosmer acquiesces to Kroll's demands that he not speak about losing his faith, which Mortengard also does not want him to talk about, but for different reasons, in fear of what Kroll might publish. Lethal White has Strike and Robin living in dread of what the headlines will say about their work for the late Minister of Culture. Cormoran actually goes so far as to bring this up in the presence of the dead Jasper Chisel that they have just discovered at the beginning, or it's right at the end of part 1. We haven't got quite yet to the beginning of part 2. Only a super injunction, which only those in the fascist state of the United Kingdom could actually believe exists. Anyway, the super injunction prevents Fleet Street reporters from turning Strike and Robin's life inside out. And then last of the 7 points, at least, the Chisel family has its secrets. The Minister of Culture hires Strike's agency to find dirt on Jimmy Knight and Geraint Wynn that they can use as counter bargaining chips to end their capacity to blackmail him. He shares neither what information they have that they are holding over his head, none of that scaffolding stuff, nor what Billy Knight witnessed years ago. If Jasper or Izzy Chiswell had told Strike that information in the beginning, it is likely that the paterfamilias wouldn't have been murdered. The biggest secrets, of course, are about the sexual relationship between Raphael and his stepmother and the stepson's plans to murder father and eventually Kinvar in order to be free to spend the millions he'll make from sale of that Stubbs painting. Not quite incest, a stepmother in bed with her stepson, but something like it. Rosmersholm's family secrets are, they're much more disturbing, not only because of the time, but because it actually is incest. Kroll reveals to Rebecca that Dr. West, her adoptive father, was very likely her biological father as well. It is implied heavily that after her mother's death, Rebecca's relationship with Dr. West changed from filial relations to sexual relations. Kroll's revelation about this is something of an Oedipus Rex moment. And I use that deliberately because Freud wrote a long and really important article about Rosmersholm and its meaning, which Beatrice Groves and Odd Sverhove both urged me to read, and it's maybe I'll put that down in the things for you to read too. Kroll's revelation about this is something of an Oedipus Rex moment. Rebecca realizes that she had been sleeping with her father, and the incest taboo crushes her ability to accept Rosmer's well overdue marriage proposal. Proposals for which she had convinced the ailing Mrs. Roma, Beata, to commit suicide. Okay, Rowling, just to make this clear, let's spell this out. She's taken the gist of Ibsen's Rosmersholm, reinvented it as the centerpiece novel of the Cormoran Strike series, Lethal White. I suspect the incongruities and non-matches in the storyline may come more obviously into play in the series' 7th book. For that, you need to read the incredibly long description of that. And Nick, yeah, I'll try to put that link down below about the links between books 4 and book 7 in Running Grave. All right, so we done all the plot points. White horses, okay? Pale ponies are everywhere in Lethal White. The symbol of Jasper Chisholm's regiment, the pubs in London and Uffington, the Paleolithic era chalk figure on Dragon Hill, the carvings of same on tokens, the bathroom door and the gallows by Billy Knight, the foal in male mourning, they come into play sufficiently often and with enough significance that Strike thinks he's beginning to imagine them, and Billy can only laugh about it. As noted above, Strike remembers them as something of a death omen in a play. Okay? Almost all the mentions of white horses in Rosmersholm are listed in a post by Odd Sverhove. It's down below. It's Lethal White, every Ibsen white horse. But Odd, I love him. We've been corresponding for more than 20 years. He leaves one out, which is the most important. Rebecca and Rosmer have left the house to commit suicide at the same place in the way that Beata killed herself. Mrs. Helseth, the maid, no relation to our Secretary of Defense, enters the room to tell Rebecca that the carriage has come to take her to the train station. She says in the very last words on the stage, "The carriage, miss, is," she looks around the room, "not here. Out together at this time of night? Well, well, well." Good Lutheran. "I must say," She goes out into the hall. She looks around, comes in again. "Not sitting on the bench. Ah, well," goes to the window and looks out. "Good heavens! What is that white thing?" Now that's the reference to the horse. "As I am a living soul, they are both out on the footbridge. God forgive the sinful creatures, if they are not in each other's arms." She gives a wild scream. "Ah! They are over, both of them, over into the mill race. Help, help." Her knees tremble. She holds on shakily to the back of a chair. She can scarcely get the words out. "No, no help here. The dead woman has taken them."
Ooh.
I mean, really quite the finish. And the audiobook production of the play to which I listened, an afterword is attached in which Ibsen is quoted as saying, "The white horses represent the inability of characters to deal with memories that haunt them." Nick, the white horses represent the inability of characters to deal with memories that haunt them. That's certainly true.
That's sort of like unresolved issues. Would that be fair?
Whoa! Could that be the subconscious mind bringing things up out of the lake that need to be dealt with? It's also Billy gone mad. The archetypal artist inside the story that can't get past the memories that haunt. Okay, to Mrs. Helseth, this takes the form of a white horse, the ghost of the dead woman, Beata seeking retribution. What Ibsen describes is more internal, haunting memories that have become unresolved, perhaps unresolvable gift. Freud, as I said, wrote this up. Some character types met with in psychoanalytic work, and that's really important. I mean, this is Freud. "If we reconstruct her past, expanding and filling in the author's hints, we may feel sure that she cannot have been without some inkling of the intimate relation between her mother and Dr. West. It must have made a great impression on her when she became her mother's successor with this man. She stood under the domination of the Oedipus complex. I think Freud eventually calls this the Electra complex. But even though she did not know that this universal fantasy had in her case become a reality. When she came to Rosmersholm, the inner force of this first experience drove her into bringing about by vigorous action the same situation which had been realized in the original instance, though through no doing of hers. It in getting rid of the wife and mother so that she might take her place with the husband and father. She describes with a convincing insistence how, against her will, she was obliged to proceed step by step to the removal of Beata Rosmer. Okay. This is not an embellishment, but an authentic description. Everything that happened to her at Rosmersholm, her falling in love with Rosmer, her hostility to her wife, was from the first a consequence of the Oedipus complex, an inevitable replica of her relations with her mother and Dr. West. Okay. I mean, again, read the whole Freud piece. It's great. And do you doubt that Rowling has read that Freudian piece, Nick? I mean, that's this, I've written about the possible and political and historical guilt felt by post-colonial Britain about its imperial past as a possible meaning of Lethal White's horse symbolism. Yes, it's in the links down below. I think Freud's interpretation points us to Rowling's departure from her Rosmersholm template, in which her Rebecca West stand-in, Robin Ellicott, comes to terms with the guilt and its underlying psychological causation, and acts to escape her personal white horses. Throughout Lethal White, Robin feels guilty about the money her parents spent on her wedding to Matt Cunliffe, about her inability to enter in their marriage with any joy, and about how she has come to despise her new husband for everything, from his facial tics to his self-importance and despicable behavior. In a scene that is a very neat parallel with the end of Rosmersholm, however, she stands with her packed bags at the doorway of her home, ready to leave Matt because he has been unfaithful to her again. There's no Mrs. Helseth there waiting on the cab. Robin finally transcends this guilt and comes to terms with the underlying dishonesty and the psychological causes of her having stayed with this man, despite their having little in common beside a shared history. Now, Rebecca West does not leave in the carriage. Robin does. Okay. But that exchange between Robin and Matt, where she ends it with, "We wouldn't be here now, Matt, but for that rape in college, which forced me to accept you as the safe haven." Okay. Robin, in brief, accepts responsibility for the marriage and for its failure, at least at the doorstep. Now, she doesn't repeat that in conversations with Vanessa Acquenzi or Cormoran Strike. She blames that all on Matt. But she understands that her incomplete recovery, her weakness, was the raison d'etre of the marriage and its consequent failure. Okay. Strike has much of the same relationship with Charlotte Campbell, his need for a loving supermodel lover, the smartest and most beautiful woman in the room, at first because of his unresolved Oedipal issues, and then because of his lost leg. That comes to a head. Read that Running Grave piece, because that comes to a head and how finally he cuts all connections with Charlotte, knows he could have saved her life, doesn't, and then allowed her to be murdered. She doesn't commit suicide, or so a friend tells me. Anyway, politics. How many of these have I got? It's supposed to only be 5 points in here. I've touched on the political polarity in both those stories. Again, Rebecca West. Rebecca West is named Cicely Isabel Fairfield. Okay, she took this name after acting in Rosmersholm as a young person, perhaps even then realizing that she would break with her leftist father, an early UK supporter of the Soviet Bolsheviks, and turn to a political posture critical of both the totalitarian fascist and the communist regimes, but also a critic of the liberal democracies and their compromise with principle. Okay, it's hard for me not to read Lethal White and Rowling's, break with the Labour Party, especially in wake of the trans wars, and not see a shift from the irresponsible idealism of her childhood Jessica Mitford idol, who was a fellow traveler to the Marxist murder of millions, to the sober principled view of the real-world Rebecca West, who took her name from the heroine of Rosmersholm, converted from her father's incestuous libertinism to the virtues of John Rosmer. And that may be the biggest takeaway of this thing is that Rowling has transformed herself by 2018, and she's writing this in 2017.
Yeah.
To break anticipate her solving coagulation, I think, because the fact that she has Robin Ellicott reenact Rosmersholm moment, Rebecca West, and changes it so that Rebecca doesn't go over the middle race with John Rosmer, doesn't submit to her incestuous past, but break with that psychological background which drove her into that relationship. That's politically, it played out the same way it does for Rebecca West, the famous author, who I'm sure in some sense Rowling identifies. She's a critic of both the liberal West as well as, say, the theocratic regime in Iran, as well as the groups on left and right that are against this. She's not quite come out against that anti-socialist past, but there's hope. All my hope for my socialist friends out there that you will see the light and move away from that delusion. Okay, the last reason is a Nabokov point, right? The white horses exist. They're not just superstition and phantasms of guilt and unresolved psychological issues. Mrs. Helseth sees the white horse before Rosmer and Rebecca plunge to their death. And her proclamation, the last words of the play, the dead woman has taken them, should not be dismissed as the conclusion of an idiot. Ibsen, I believe, is suggesting that those who love truly never truly leave us. Right? Gotta get that quote right, because those who love never truly leave us. Yeah. And God help us if they are unhappy. Okay. Theodore Rosmer, by her conversations with her brother and her letter to Mortensgaard, sets the stage for the revenge that she eventually has in the double suicide of the Norwich, where she died, which points to what Nabokov scholars call potos toranos. Don't ask me to say that 10 times fast. Potos toranos. You know, the great Russian American novelist, central theme of the other world, according at least to Vladimir Alexandrov, and you know, really, there's not many bigger Nabokov scholars than Vladimir Alexandrov. The writer Rowling has said that she really loves Nabokov, was a meta-literary and comic genius, but as Nabokov's wife Vera wrote in 1979, his otherworldliness, his fascination with the liminal and transcendent was his, quote, main theme, a subject that Vera, his wife, said saturates everything he wrote. And the influence of the spiritual realm that we see in Ibsen and Nabokov is in the play as well as in Rowling's works, most obviously in the ghosts and paintings we met in the Hogwarts Saga, but also in the post-Potter books as well. We see it in the Ghost of Fairy Fairbrother, in the Casual Vacancy, and we see it most especially in Troubled Blood. Is that going to be my shed point for Troubled Blood? I hope not, but it's because there's so many things. But after I wrote up the Ghosts of Troubled Blood, Louise Freeman went back and wrote up the ghosts that haunt the first Strike novels as well, and it's definitely a place inside these books. Lethal White is mythic beyond Leda and the Swans, as important as that symbolism is, the book in the series. Galbraith in Lethal White talks about Hephaestus and Aphrodite, about blind oracles and seers, and the haunting presence of the White Horse of Uffington. The dead who haunt Strike 4 is chiefly Jasper Chisel after his murder. We see his image not only in the discovery of his corpse, but each time Robin and Cormoran look at the pictures she took at the crime scene and in their visit near Story's End to the Met, the room dedicated to that mystery. Leda appears relatively rarely in this book, almost as marginalia, especially when compared to her presence in Strike's mind throughout career. The psychic realm, a world which is not rational or perceived by the senses, is present in the notes that Strike makes about intuition or gut instincts. And more obviously when he notes he feels he is being watched. I remember Ozzy and Ricky at Nick and Ilse. But remember, he says at one point, I'm going to read this. This is from chapter 52. You know, Strike turned off the light, closed his eyes, and sank once more into uneasy dreams of the empty house where squares of unfaded wallpaper bore witness to the removal of everything of value. But this time he walked alone with the strange sensation that hidden eyes were watching. Okay? And that's the Stubbs painting this mission. Rowling is meta-literary, yes. The Rosmersholm epigraphs, echoes, and Rowling's departure from key scenes listed from that literary template tell us that. But Rowling is also metaphysical, which is to say she's pointing to a world transcending reality all around us, watching and influencing us, an other world to which we are bound and destined. The Rosmersholm white horses and those in lethal white tells us that as well. Okay, that's 5 long points. You know, read the article if you want all the details. It's in the stuff below. But Rosmersholm, you know, when we talk about Troubled Blood and Fairy Queen, it's as intense a gold mine in terms of epigraphically dependent, you know, books, whatever to use the queen of literary illusions language. But it's I don't think it is as dependent on that story, because you get both. You get two. We'll talk about this. You get you know, for the price of one, you get 2 stories in there that are taken from Fairy Queen. Rosmersholm, you get the one straight up, and it's almost point by point. Everything in the book comes from it, and it rescues what would be pretty much a silly book. Again, the Stubbs painting is the whole engine of the murderer's motive, and supposedly, I mean, maybe he just wants to kill his father because he wants to kill his father. You know, he's a psychopath. But the whole point is to get the Stubbs painting, and he chooses the most ridiculous route to get the Stubbs painting. What rescues Lethal White from being a silly book, and one that that detective editor that was supposed to be such a genius that Rowling, you know, did the whole Robert Galbraith sideshow, really isn't that good at editing this stuff. But what rescues Lethal White from being a silly book, you know, one that the silly editor could have somehow tightened this up or come up with a better, you know, thing than that painting by Stubbs as being the, you know, the engine of this patricide, is the dependence on Rosmersholm. Rowling is faithful not only to her own Lake inspiration, but to that Freudian family romance themed murder, double suicide, etc., inside one of the great plays of Western theater, however neglected. That's, you know, I think why she chose to, you know, which one of our fan fictions you like best, you know, Thom Burke or Sonia Friedman in conversation with Rowling. I think that's why she wanted that play performed, was to say, to really highlight how important that play is to her, about how big Bad Dad is in the backdrop to her writing. And boy, Nick, I think you need to go back to Tutsill and talk to the neighbors there and say, did that family ever ride white horses, you know, around the town? Has there been any scandal about that graveyard, something buried in there? Yeah. Anyway, I know we've gone long here, Nick, but what a show. Really, I'm probably going to be quoting from the transcript of this show as off the wall as we are in these things, until you write this stuff up about Tutsill as the foundation of the Harry Potter series, of Casual Vacancy, and of the Cormoran Strike series. That's a wow trifecta, Nick. As we go on, now I'm going to be looking for little houses inside the. I'm going to have to watch the Fantastic Beast movies. You know, oh my god.
Oh, speaking of which, so tomorrow we have the centerpiece of the Fantastic Beast trilogy.
Usually when you say centerpiece, it's about something grand, you know. Let's just call it the middle point, you know. Anyway.
So I'm gonna I sigh because John and I both we look forward to the books. We don't really look forward to the films, but it's set in Paris, or a large part of it is set in Paris. So I'm going to be talking about Rowling's life in Paris.
Wow. I mean, are you going to talk about her family history, the
Yeah,
grandfather?
yeah.
Wow, I might tune into this episode. I'm going to talk about the golden thread of texts inside the text. I mean, Rosmersholm is a text inside the text of Lethal White, but not really. I mean, Strike isn't looking at the book, Rosmersholm, the way he does in Bombyx Mori, Silkworm, and in Troubled Blood with the mad paintings and pictures of the book. What's it called? He calls it the secret book. What is that called?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I have to reread all of Troubled Blood before that show. Yeah.
Yeah. Does it have a name? It's because it's just
all the serious strikers. All the serious strikers are
yelling
on the screen here, Nick. We listen to these guys. These guys can't even name them.
Tell us in the comments, so then we'll know for when we're doing the Troubled Blood episode.
Yeah, seriously, that's going to be one of the two shows is talking about that book because of the astrological symbolisms.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rowling actually illustrates the book.
Yeah.
And outside of the professor, nobody has talked about those illustrations and what they actually reveal about the story. But anyway, I'm talking about when I talk about Crimes of Grindelwald, is that this is not just a chocolate frog card or the Beetle the Bard tales that Hermione's trying to figure out at the end of Deathly Hallows. We have 10 different texts inside Crimes of Grindelwald. Rowling's like, okay, it's a collaborative exercise. So I have to assume that David Yates is going to throw out at least 6 of the 10 things I put in here. So let's just super stack this with text they have to figure out so that maybe something that I wrote will survive the butchery of the editing room. Really, what a dog's mess the Crimes of Grindelwald is. Anyway, we're going to talk about that next, Nick. We're gonna revisit that mess.
I'll look forward to it if the path to the lake is still passable and it's not too muddy.
Well, it really have to be a storm if I can't get into my shed. I told you that just before we started filming, this giant wasp, I'm talking about a mother of all wasps, decided that he wanted to show himself in perfect outline against these box lights that I have here in my studio. That was really, talk about a hovering ghost-like image. I was like, oh, great. We're going to be talking about the ghost here. If I survive this thing, I managed to transmigrate his soul to another shed in another world.
We suffer for our art, John.
Thank you again to our listeners that are indulging us in this Kanreki celebration, and I hope that you'll be with us for Crimes of Grindelwald, the Lake and Shed reading.